Okay. Spatula's the best it's gonna get. That better not fall because it's on a very precarious, like, setup. Thoughts and prayers to this candle. Does it look like I'm performing a seance? I'm drinking a Celsius. I've never had a Celsius before. It has an insane amount of caffeine in it. I have never drinking this much caffeine in my life. I'm like a latte girly specifically, and this is 200 milligrams of caffeine. So I am wired. Welcome to the vibe with Jules. Woo! So the vibe is gonna be first of all, I'm Jules. Nice to meet you. Pleasure. The vibe is gonna be kind of like a once a week podcast-ish thing. I'm calling it a podcast-ish thing because I feel very limited by the term podcast. Much like many identifiers in my life, I'm not a big fan of being put in a box. I'm kind of hoping to make it like a once a week 30 to 45, maybe an hour thing. But I don't want to limit myself and I don't want to set anyone's expectations too high. As you can tell, we are already starting from very humble beginning. I've also got this microphone that I got off of Amazon for $30 and this spatula that I don't remember when I got. So you can tell we're really starting from the bottom. We're starting from the bones. But I realized I kept putting this shit off because I was like, it needs to look good. And what is the phrase? Make it happen and then make it look good later. I'm kind of trying to embody that, though that's not really my style. I like to do things right the first time. I like it to look good the first time. But beggars can't be choosers. I'm going to talk about a lot of things here. There's really no limit to what I may discuss. I feel like anyone who follows me on any other social media platform knows that not only can I not shut the fuck up, but I also can't stay on topic. So we're going to talk about all kinds of things. What I'm hoping for is that once a week, we will address 4 different vibes. 4 specific vibes. The pop culture vibe, the political vibe, because really quick, before we get into this, we are going to talk politics on this account. And if that's not your thing, I would ask yourself why it isn't. You live in this country and in this world. Maybe get up, buck up and like be an adult and start paying attention to things. Political vibe and the personal vibe. And then the personal vibe is me. That's my favorite topic. I'm hoping to have like a 4th vibe that I just like dive into like a little bit deeper. So I'll pick like a specific subject and I'll dive into it deeper. But once a week, we'll go through the political vibe, the pop culture vibe, the personal vibe of what's happened throughout the week. And we'll go from there. And then hopefully I'll have one thing to like kind of deep dive in on because I really can't be left to my own devices in terms of like coming up with shit to talk about. My ADHD brain will drive me crazy. And this Celsius is not helping. We'll talk about all kinds of things. We'll talk about Robert Pattinson. Love him. We'll talk about the crushing socioeconomic pain that we all sit in. Not a fave. Or we can talk about my favorite subject, me. That's what we're going to be talking about today. Me. I kind of thought, listen, this is what this candle's here for. It's not just here to look good. And in fact, actually, while I'm looking at it, I'm afraid that it's going to start melting and melt onto my blankie that I got here. We're going to let God be the judge of that. I just thought maybe for the first episode, it might be fitting if we kind of treated this like a first date, right? You could get to know me. I could get to know you, and we could decide if this is going to work out for us. Listen, okay? If this isn't going to work out for you, just don't show up to date number 2. It's fine to just consider me a girl on your phone, but let's get to know each other a little bit, okay? Maybe this will turn into a situationship. Maybe this will turn into a friends with benefits situation if you're lucky, but I'm married, so we just can't tell my husband. I'm unsure what a lot of people know me from. If people know me at all, you might know by saying you don't have to know who I am, okay? Me, personally, I don't know who I am most days. I'm just going to give you the juice, a little bit of my life story, and we'll kind of go from there. And then I got a little Q&A at the end. So let me introduce myself. Hi, my name is Jules. And I'm a piece of shit. Actually, a comedian. I've been doing comedy in Minneapolis and comedy really throughout my whole... I've always been a funny bitch. But I've also been, like, presently online. And by presently online, I mean, like, more than just my friends and family following me for probably about the past 4 years. I feel like most people probably know me from TikTok. But before we even begin with TikTok, we have to begin with the beginning. So I was born in South Carolina to 2 parents, as many are. All of my family is from the South. That's kind of like a big part of my content that I make online. My dad's side of the family is from like the deep South, like kind of the like Georgia, Alabama, Louisiana part of the South. And then my mom's family are East Coast Appalachian Southerners. So like South Carolina, North Carolina, Tennessee, that kind of area. You may think, are they related? No. My dad was in the military and my mom was a teacher, and they both met in South Carolina, and they had me, which I think is probably one of their bigger regrets. My dad was in the military, moved around a lot. So like I said, I was born in South Carolina, but not long after being born, we moved to Connecticut and then Maine and then New Hampshire, and that's where my brother was born. When I was 4, we moved to the Middle East, specifically to Egypt. And Egypt is kind of where I like started to first gain consciousness. A great place to gain consciousness, the Middle East. Great place to be. Great food. Great place to begin your palate. Hummus, bread, olive oil. Oh, you got shawarma. You got good coffee. You got dates. Really expanded my palate from a very early age. Loved living in Egypt. And then we lived in Egypt till I was about 6 or 7, and then we moved to Florida. And this isn't really where it all started to go wrong, but it definitely wasn't where it started to go right. Moving back to America was really hard. It was really overwhelming, and I felt like I didn't really fit in. And I know that's so like, I'm weird. I'm a weird guy. You see me wearing this beanie, blah, 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 blah. How does the thing go? Anyways, I had a really hard time moving to America and adjusting to America, and I was always very shy. I had a kind of harder time making friends. I could make friends at like church. Oh, that's another thing. I was raised Mormon, and we will get into that. But I always had an easier time making friends at church, but I never really had an easy time making friends in school. I had a really hard time relating with other kids. Surprise, surprise. A girl feels misunderstood from an early age. Canon event. I remember as a kid going to the school counselor a lot, especially like when we lived in Florida, and I would always be like, we need to do something about bullying. The social justice warrior in me started from a very early age. Was I being bullied? No. Did I really know kids who were being bullied? Also no. But I was like, someone needs to take a stand against what? I don't know. And I'm sure whatever was like really going on beneath the surface of me feeling the need to go to the school counselor once a week, the school counselor picked up on. But as far as I'm concerned, I was just really passionate about helping people. But even though like I didn't really have a lot of friends at school, or I felt kind of like out of place at school, I was always kind of able to make friends. I made a lot of friends at church. Mormon kids are weird. You can meet each other and like you're on the same frequency and you just like know how to communicate with each other. And you can't really do that in public school. I had some friends when I lived in Florida named Sienna and Kieran. We would watch like funny commercials. We would look up like funny commercials. And we would write out the script line by line, and we'd print out and waste some poor, and this is 2008, mind you. Like we're hitting 2007, we're hitting 2008. The recession is very much imminent. And I am wasting my friend's poor mother's printer ink so that we can put on a show and show off our ability to, I guess, act out commercials. Surprise, surprise, a bitch likes to be the center of attention. And then while I was also living in Florida, I moved to North Carolina for like a year, and then I moved back to Florida, and then we moved to Illinois. Byron, Illinois. Shout out to Byron, Illinois. There is I don't know if it's still there, but when I was there from the age of like 9 to 10, or maybe like 8 to 10, there was a diner called Sam's, and they had the best the absolute most delicious, scrumptious, out of this world root beer floats. And I don't know if that place still exists or if their root beer floats still exist, but if you know Byron, Illinois, and you know the diner Sam's, do they still have root beer floats? And if they do, could you get me one? And then after we lived in Illinois for a little while, we moved to Omaha, Nebraska. And this is when I started being a bad kid. And by being a bad kid, I just mean like I started saying damn and like hell. Probably like 11 though. So really, like what age can you become a bad kid? Also, what makes a bad kid? Things to think about. And then after we moved to Nebraska, we moved to South Carolina for a little while, for about 6 months. And this is really where like bullying actually became a problem in my life. Let me tell you something. Really something to be, listen, I love the South. I've got nothing but good things to say, but I will say something. People in the South know how to be bitches. If you don't know me and you don't know kind of like what I talk about on TikTok, and I really like advocate for the South. I'm really like, hey, you need to care about the South, because people like to be like, no, they're bumfuck hillbillies. And it's like, sorry, you don't know how to understand or how to appreciate a Waffle House in the world around you. But these people know how to be hoes if they need to. These bitches were mean. I specifically remember an instance where like there were these girls in my class and we were all grouping up because there was some group project, and I asked this group of girls if they could be in my group, and they were like, there were only 3 of them and they needed a 4th, and I couldn't get in another group. And I remember one of the girls being like, oh, fine. And that turned me into a that basically just turned me into a deeply insecure person. Not that situation specifically, although I will say that situation did not happen. It was just interesting because even though I had always been shy, I'd always been sure of myself. I had never really been met with people who didn't fundamentally like me as a person. I'm a little white girl, had a lot of privilege in my life, didn't really have a lot of people being like, hey, fuck you. And now I did. And so I really started to develop a lot of deep insecurities the way I feel anyone does at 6th grade. I'm not really this is not that. I'm not, I understand that this is not maybe the most serious problem in the world, but to be a girl in 6th grade is harder than being a Marine in many instances. I know it's not particularly traumatic, but one, I'm keeping trauma out of this shit because I just met you. This is our first date. You want me to talk about all the times I've ever been truly traumatized? No. We ain't got that kind of time. After living in South Carolina for probably about a year, I moved to Sicily, Italy. Sicily, Italy is the island. Sicilia is the little island off the boot of Italy, if you don't know. Really cool place to be. They've got an active volcano. It's an island. They got beaches. They got gelato. They got pasta. What the fuck else could a bitch want? Surprisingly, a lot. I repeated the 6th grade, which my parents said was because I was always the youngest in my class. But repeating the 6th grade put me at the oldest in my class, and now I kind of look back on it and it just kind of feels like a way for adults to call me stupid and not have me know. I found it was really much easier to make friends there than it had been in America. I was going to a military school, and anyone who's been in the military will tell you that military schools are much, much smaller than regular schools. I was specifically at a combined middle high school, and then when I ended up going to high school, I'm jumping a little ahead in the story, but in high school I went to a full K through 12 school. Lots of military schools are very, very small. And because they're very, very small, people who are there, if you get a new person who comes in, are very open and willing to talk and make friends and what have you. And so that was really nice. It was a really nice way for me to kind of reestablish myself. But also I was deeply insecure. And also at this time really developing a lot of mental health issues. I don't really know what it is, but something about 6th to 8th grade for a girl is basically like being in Vietnam during a war. I was starting to develop real severe anxiety, really severe depression too. And then I had this deep insecurity and I wanted everyone to be my friend, and people were really nice and really wanted to be my friend, but I just was not a good person to be friends with, frankly. Look back on that kind of time in my life with a very much cringe goggles. I'm this is very cringe. But there was also something they said about I had never been, not necessarily more myself, but I was really into Doctor Who and Tumblr. I was very awkward, and I really liked the punk grunge, Pierce the Veil, Sleeping with Sirens, both of whom are very much still in my repertoire. I really kind of played into that, and I really othered myself because I was afraid that people would other me anyways. And so I was well, I'll just make myself a freak before anyone else can. And so I put on that raccoon fucking eyeliner, and I would show up to school in fucking black leggings that were dirty and a Doctor Who shirt and be why don't boys like me? Girl, you can see your panties through your leggings. I wore a fuck ton of eyeliner. I told people I was related to Alex Gaskarth from All Time Low, which is not true. I'm sorry to Alex Gaskarth from All Time Low for having to be briefly related to me. Also, at that time, I had another friend come out as bisexual to me, and that was kind of really when I started to question my sexuality, because I was 2 bi bitches? I've been friends with 2 bi bitch. This is the thing. If you look back on your childhood and you're man, I was friends with a lot of gay kids, I have to tell you something about yourself. I really hated middle school. I hated middle school because I felt like everybody else knew who they were and I didn't, which, as now looking back on it as an adult, I'm what the fuck do you mean who you are? You're 12. There's nothing to be yet. But I was everybody else seems to, be confident in themselves and know themselves, and I just didn't, and I really envied that. But surprise, surprise, but that's a theme that would kind of really follow me throughout my entire life. But I got through middle school the way every teenage girl does, and that was with a really severe eating disorder and some really damaging kick messages in my inbox. girlhood. Then I moved to the Netherlands in 2015. Freshman and sophomore year were not much better than like middle school in general. Still very mentally ill. I was still very deeply insecure, and especially because I was moving to a new school and there were new kids and there was new culture to fit into. Like I had to kind of navigate that, and I did not do a very good job. A lot of this really has to do with just like growing up overseas. You're gonna find a very common theme throughout my life, and that is that I'm constantly unsure of myself and I'm constantly changing myself to fit in where I am. And I really just think that's just a symptom of moving around so much. I moved around so much, and then I moved overseas, and as a really anxious kid, I didn't like, even though I was attending like American schools, being out in public, I didn't like being able to be identified as an American, and that really stressed me out. And just having to constantly change and evolve and whatever to fit in so that I could blend into the background was a real passion of mine. Really wanted to blend in. It was really all I wanted. And then my whole life I really haven't. So maybe I should really stop fighting. This was also really where like I started to have a problem with Mormonism. Remember, I said that we were going to address this later. I really started having a problem with Mormonism as I kind of got older. I was very, like I said, like social justice was something that continuously followed me. And then my freshman year was my sophomore year was 2016, which was the year that Donald Trump got elected. And so that definitely kickstarted even more social activism work that I was doing. And it was something that was really contradictory to like my Mormon beliefs. And also like my parents were Mormon, but they were also pretty progressive, except for that time that my mom showed me a Mormon message when I came out to her. If anything, they're like way more progressive now. But my point is that like my parents were progressive and I was progressive and we were Mormon, and it doesn't really line up a whole lot. Even though I was drinking and smoking weed because it was Europe and you could do that at young ages, and also developing a pretty severe nicotine addiction, I was still going to church on Sunday. Because, like I said, because of the Donald Trump presidency, I ended up participating in a lot of like protests and stuff. I even helped plan a protest. There was a Women's March chapter out of the Netherlands, and I helped plan it with a bunch of other women, and I even got to speak at it last minute. And I spoke in front of like 15,000 people, and my speech was bad. Now when I go back and watch it, I'm like, this is too long. These people don't speak as good of English as to like what I'm trying to portray. I should have kept it short, sweet, and a little bit of a rally, and instead I like really dived into it, and it was like maybe like 7 whole minutes, and I look back on that and kind of cringe. But an opportunity nonetheless, and one that I'm really grateful for. Junior and senior year, I did kind of end up sorting myself out a little bit. I got involved in sports, and I made some really good friends, and I played soccer and did all kinds of things, and it was fun. Junior and senior year, I kind of got better. I started to kind of figure myself out more. Still was very deeply depressed, but also high now. Living overseas as a whole in general is something that really shaped who I am. I traveled a lot. I went to Paris and London and Turkey, and I went to Poland, and I saw Auschwitz, and I saw Ireland, and I saw Scotland, and I went all these kinds of different places, and I saw all these really different things, and it really kind of formed me into who I am today. Back then, I didn't really appreciate it the way I should have. My dad likes to tell the story about how he had to go to Paris for a work trip, and I was in middle school, and he was going to bring me and my mom, and he did bring me and my mom, but I pitched a huge fit about it because I was missing a party at school, and was not happy about that. And he always is like, I was literally taking you to Paris, and you pitched a fit because you were missing a party at school. Okay, I was also like 12, so what do you think was probably more important to me? A party. I graduated high school. Yay. A real challenge, frankly, at the time. And then I attended BYU Idaho for 2 years. So you may be asking yourself, for someone who was super progressive, trying to leave the Mormon church, and also addicted to cigarettes, why did you attend BYU Idaho? Because I like to make things difficult for myself. Basically, like my parents wanted me to. We knew people who like lived down there, and I hadn't lived in America for basically like almost 10 years at that point, and there's a police officer walking around my parking lot. What are you doing? Basically, we knew people who lived in Rexburg, and I had a friend who already was out in Rexburg, and basically after not living in America for basically 10 years, you kind of needed to go somewhere where you knew people. And so I went to Rexburg, Idaho, which is a place that sits atop a hellmouth. Do not go to Rexburg, Idaho. And my parents also really encouraged it. They wanted me to go somewhere where I wasn't going to turn into like a prostitute or a whore of some kind, but joke's on them. I turned into something worse. Moving back to America fucking sucked. When I moved back to America, I started developing really severe panic attacks. I like America. Most controversial opinion. I like being here. I like that I moved here. Probably won't move elsewhere. But I had a really hard time. America's very overwhelming. It's very like busy. It's very whatever. I would go into the mall, and I would like have straight up panic attacks. And actually, my first week, fun fact about me, my first week of moving to America, I went to the mall for the first time, the Ridgedale Mall. Have you ever seen the movie Juno? That mall. I went to that mall, and I had a panic attack so severe I went into the family bathroom at the Macy's and I threw up and passed out. And I was afraid that I was going to shit my pants when I was in the process of passing out. Why? Sometimes that's what happens, okay? Don't act like it's never happened to you. And I was afraid that I was going to like shit my pants because I was vomiting and just like my whole stomach was tearing up. I pulled my pants down, passed out, woke up, ass up, face down on the tile of the Macy's bathroom. A whole line of people had coagulated outside. There were people banging on the door. I was more embarrassed than I ever had been in my life. And I was just so busy screaming, crying, throwing up, shitting my pants. And it was definitely a low moment for me and a great introduction into the great United States of America. Of hair is pissing me off. I love a bang, and I've got cute bangs, but it won't tuck the way I want. BYU Idaho also fucking sucked. I was bisexual, I was addicted to cigarettes, and I couldn't wear shorts or sandals. You can't wear sandals at BYU Idaho because those toes might tempt a bitch. I moved into an apartment with 8 other girls, and I actually liked some of the girls, but I didn't like other of the girls. The roommate who I had like in my direct room, her name was Emma. Love Emma. Shout out to Emma. Hi, girl. Ended up setting her up with her now husband because her now husband actually attended high school with me in the Netherlands, and he ended up going to BYU Idaho, and I set them up. So kind of embarrassing, though, that someone who knows me from high school is going to be a part of my life forever, though, because I'm going to be a part of Emma's life forever, and kind of wish that wasn't the case. BYU Idaho sucked for, like, a multitude of reasons. They had, like, so many different rules. The curfew was, like, 11. You weren't allowed to have boys in your room, and I had a huge Nazi of a roommate who was, like, so freaky about making sure that there weren't boys in the room and that we were like coming in at curfew. She'd like keep track of when we left and when we came, and she slept on the couch, and she was also like 7 years older than the rest of us in the apartment, and her name was Amelia. And girl, if you see this, you really didn't have to do all that, and I hope you're doing well, but girl, what the fuck? Come on this show. Come on this podcast. I'd love to talk to you. I also met my now husband like a week after being there. We started dating within like 3 weeks of meeting each other, and we started like basically sleeping together like 3 months within seeing each other. First night we made out, I texted my friend Alexa and was like, oh my gosh, you're gonna be so disappointed in me. I made out with a conservative boy. Yes, the rumors are true. My husband was conservative. About 3 months after we first met and got together, we started sleeping together, which is like a huge no-no in Mormonism, which is why it took like up to 3 months. But that pussy turned him leftist, so you know, lose a battle, win the war. Brent grew up, my husband's name is Brent. Brent grew up in a very like conservative household in Georgia, and just kind of grew up, you know, the way any teenage boy does, like being exposed to like Ben Shapiro and all these other like shitty right-wing grifter bitches. But because I was friends with like a bunch of whores and homosexuals, he started like hanging out with me and my friends and being introduced to new things and new people. And I think he always talks about like how that really grew him. He was like, I was just always hanging out with the people I was always told to hate. I was in all these situations that I was always told were bad, and I realized they weren't that bad and there weren't people to hate. And so I changed. And like, frankly, don't you wish your bitch would? Then I transferred to the University of Utah, like halfway through being at BYU Idaho, because BYU Idaho was killing me slowly and deeply. Rexburg, Idaho is the worst place on earth. And I went back there recently, like within the past 2 years, I guess, and it's gotten better. They have a Starbucks now, which frankly is offensive, because when I was there, you had to go to June's, which was like a locally owned coffee place, and it was the only locally owned coffee place in the whole town. There was only one Walmart. There, like, it's the smallest town in the world. It is the most conservative place in the world. There was a time when COVID was going around that we were having I was not involved in this, when they were having COVID parties because there were no jobs in Rexburg because of how small of a town it was, and the only way to really make money was to donate plasma. And there was a time when plasma donations were paying higher if you had COVID. So they would have COVID parties to intentionally get COVID so that they could sell their plasma for money. We at one point had the highest cases of COVID per capita in the world. I am not fucking with you. And so you can kind of imagine what that does to a person living there. So I transferred to the University of Utah, and I really like that. Also, I'm not sure if I mentioned this. I was studying political science. I studied political science all through college. And transferred to the University of Utah. Really liked the University of Utah. Actually a really good school. Utah as a whole, not a great place to be, but the University of Utah was fun. I made a lot of good friends. I had a lot of good times, and I got to graduate my degree, and I also did a lot of like social activism work throughout all of that. But also while I was in college, I started posting on TikTok. I kind of started posting on TikTok the way everyone did, which was like in 2019 and quarantine and COVID and like what else was there to do. Like the 2019 to 2020 kind of realm. But it wasn't really like serious. I was just kind of posting funny haha videos. And then once I transferred to the University of Utah, I started doing videos called From Fame to Flop, which is where I talked about like influencers who had more or less fallen off and why and how and what have you. And that was kind of like what helped me get my first 10K. And after getting that 10K in a year, I hit 100K. And so it was a really like fast progressing thing, and it kind of continues to be a more fast progressing thing. I started posting TikToks about all kinds of things, but my TikToks really started off comedic in the beginning. I was doing a lot of comedy, I was doing a lot of skits and what have you, and it was really fun. I really like TikTok. It's a really good place for me to like do quick, short, little haha funny things. And I liked it, and it really started to grow. I look back on my early like TikTok days and like doing Fame to Flop, and I kind of regret that. The older I get, the less I really care about, and also like the farther we fall into fascism, the less I really care about influencers. And like especially in the beginning, I was just I was like a Reddit snark bitch. And I look back on that now and I'm like, girl, get a life. We all learn, we all grow, we all change. And so my content changed. And then I kind of started posting more political content too, and people liked that. And then I was posting comedy and politics, and people liked that. And now and then, well, I guess we should kind of keep this chronological. I graduated from the University of Utah with a degree in political science and American government and international politics. I graduated from the University of Utah, had to move out of Salt Lake because they were trying to charge me $2,400 a month for a 1-bedroom, 1-bath, 500 square foot apartment. Do not move to Salt Lake City. It's the fucking worst. And I also just had to get out of Utah. I had very much like left the church at this point once I moved out to the University of Utah, and I had like my own apartment. Brent and I basically started living together, and I was living my life, and I had an espresso machine, and that was a real step for me. And so I had really like left the church, more or less. And then I graduated, and we moved out here to Minnesota. And here we are. And so then I moved here to Minnesota, and I've been doing comedy. I've been doing stand-up. I've been doing TikTok. I'm at 200,000 followers now, which is awesome. Always happy to be there. And so this is kind of me spreading my wings a little bit. TikTok can be a little limiting in what you can and cannot do. And frankly, with this ban and shit and what have you, I don't want to be tied to one thing. I need to spread my wings and fly. I also started really posting about like being from the South, and also like the politics of the South and the politics between like the North and the South, and like Northerners and Southerners, and specifically like Republicans and Democrats, and kind of like basically how everyone needs to like shut the fuck up a little bit more. And people seem to like that. So, hey, that leads us to today with this podcast thing, whatever it may be. This one will probably be about like probably 30 to 40 minutes. I'm hoping in the future maybe they'll be longer, but again, I don't want to limit myself. If it's 30 to 40 minutes, it's 30 to 40 minutes. What's a girl to do? Should we get into a Q&A? Should we do that? Let's do it! Has this been interesting? Has this been fun? Let me know what you would like to see, frankly, because I mean, you can make me do anything for a price, but don't get weird with it. Here we go. Q&A time. I asked people on TikTok for Q's, and here are my A's. So here we go. Best place to visit or eat in the South. I feel like I'd want to visit one day, but haven't looked into travel plans. Okay, so so like I said, I talk a lot about the South. I talk a lot about being from the South. I talk a lot about politics in the South. So some of these questions are going to be Southern based. We will get into my Southernness and politics and what have you the farther we get into this shit. But right now, if you aren't a part of that, that's fine. We'll get there. Don't worry, girl. We'll catch you up. All right, no child left behind. Best place to eat, visit in the South. If you're gonna visit anywhere, I would say Charleston, South Carolina is really pretty. I think Raleigh, North Carolina, or Asheville, North Carolina are really pretty, but currently because of Hurricane Helene, they're quite in distress, so it might be a little while. Raleigh, not as much, but Asheville, very much so. The problem with this question is that where I have lived in the South and been in the South has been like Columbia, South Carolina, and like in the sticks. And so not really places where one would travel. But and this is the other thing also is that like, in terms of food, all I'm going to do is recommend like Cookout and Waffle House. Like, I feel like in the South, chain restaurants are much better, and gas station food is so good. Everyone who's going to tell you like, oh, where to eat, they're going to tell you to go eat at some hole in the wall or some gas station, and it's going to have the best fucking food you've ever eaten in your life. You just can't. This is what I would say. I can't give you a best place to go or a best place to eat, but what I can say is wherever you go, trust the people around you to lead you to the food, okay? If you go, talk to someone on the street and be like, hey, where's the best barbecue? Where can I get that is one thing. Find somewhere that serves barbecue. Be like, where's the best barbecue? Because the locals will know better than anyone else in the world. North Carolina is a good part of like the East Coast South to go to and experience like the East Coast South. And then if you wanted to experience like the deep South, the like Alabama, Louisiana, Georgia part of the South, I would recommend going to Louisiana, and New Orleans is always beautiful and always a good place to go. What's your most and least favorite Southern cuisine? I told you it would be Southern based. Favorite Southern cuisine? I mean, where does one start? I love a boiled peanut. I love liver mush. And every time I mention liver mush, people are always like, what is that? It's basically like a sandier hamburger. That's basically the best way I can describe it. I love liver mush. I love, I would say like just the best Southern cuisine is soul food. Basically, Black people really know what the fuck they're doing when they cook down there. Like just, if I could make the best Southern plate, it would be bomb ass fucking fried chicken. Bomb fried chicken. Or if not fried chicken, then like some good pulled pork or barbecue. That, a thick, rich, creamy mac and cheese, collards, some good collard greens. Love them, love them, love them. Some collards, maybe a biscuit or some cornbread of some kind. You could get some mashed potato. Just a soul food plate is actually probably the best. That's the best food. My least favorite Southern cuisine, and this is something that's going to ruffle some feathers, banana pudding. I don't like banana. I don't like banana flavoring, and so banana pudding is not really my thing. But I love, like, I like chitlins and okra and like kind of like the stuff that people also don't like. I don't like banana pudding though. And I feel like everyone's gonna crucify me for that, but I just don't like banana, and that's, kind of knocks out banana pudding for me. How would you compare living in a blue state to living in a red state? Do you feel much of a difference to your day-to-day life? And if so, in what ways? One of the things I talk about on TikTok a lot is blue and red states. And I basically talk about how people have this perception of red states, specifically red states in the South, as like this Trump bumfuck MAGA world, and that's really not what it is. And I could get into that. I could make a whole video about that. I could do a whole song and dance about that, but that's not what this is about. This is about living in a red state versus a blue state. I will say this. I currently live in Minnesota, which was blue in the last election, but it is quite red. This is kind of like the best way. Well, one, a red state is not necessarily just a southern state. So we'll start there. If I was comparing like living in Utah to living here, right? Utah is a red state, but it's not a southern state. I would say that living in Utah fucking sucked, but it sucked because it was Utah. What I kind of try to explain to people is that there are shitty, annoying fucking assholes everywhere. Everywhere you go. There are the same type of shitty, annoying assholes everywhere you go. I will say, in a red state, there is definitely something to be said about, like, you really have to keep up with politics a little bit more, and you do have a lot more fear. Like, living here, when we talk about, like, political changes and what have you, I always say that, like, Minnesota's pretty normal. If you want to move to, like, a normal place, Minnesota tends to make pretty normal decisions on things. They make pretty normal laws. They have pretty normal people. I feel like it's a pretty normal place to be. Whereas when I was living in Utah, there was always some kind of, like, Republican legislation that was being passed or led that I kind of always had to worry about. And so I will say, in my day-to-day life, I don't have to worry about politics as much in a blue state. Or at the very least, I don't have to worry about politics affecting me, whereas in a red state, you very much do. I think that is something that could be incorporated in, like, the day-to-day of your life, if that's something that's a part of your life. But I also think there's something to be said about, But I also think there's something to be said about how in red states there's always more work to do. I think I do lots of activism stuff here and what have you, but I will say like in red states there are always typically more organizations to reach out to and more issues to fight for and more things to kind of deal with. And so it is a little bit more work heavy as well. And I also think I will say this, I'm specifically thinking of queer people as someone who's bisexual. I will say marginalized people in red states are much more are a different kind of people than in blue states. I find in red states, if you're like a part of a marginalized identity, you are more normal almost. And what I mean by that is like the queer people in like red states kind of have to navigate being queer and being in sometimes a more aggressive area. But again, there's also something to be said about how blue states can be just as homophobic, just as racist as red states are. But I find that in blue states, it's almost like in red states, you can face more oppression, but in blue states, they act like they face more oppression. And you're like, brother, you voted blue in this election and most of your representatives are Democrats, so I really don't know how oppressed you think you are here. Whereas in red states, I find people kind of understand the danger that they face, but also understand the people around them and why, when you think about like voting and stuff, like why the people around them vote the way they do and stuff like that. And so I find that people in red states are a little bit more, marginalized people specifically in red states are a little bit more nuanced in their conversations and in their identities than people in blue states. But all of this is just like generalizations. My genuine belief is that day to day there is not much of a difference, frankly. Like day to day there is the only thing that pisses me off is that I can't go to a Publix here. And there's no Bojangles. But that's the case for other red states too. So, beggars can't be choosers. At what point should I be mad at my apartment complex because they haven't fixed the leak in my ceiling? It's been 4 months and they know about it. I think maybe you should kill your landlord. Any country music recommendations? I started listening to Linda Martell because of you. Oh my gosh! And I love her. For context, I'm Spanish. I don't know anything about country music. Okay, Inez, I have a playlist. I don't know if I should promote this playlist. I talked about country music recently on TikTok. I have a playlist called Pickens on my Spotify. It's linked in my link tree on TikTok, and I'll link it here. My problem with my Pickens playlist is that the TikTok I made was very much like, people hate country music because they don't understand country music and because they have an idea of what country music is and they see it as like post 9/11 country music, and that's not really what it is. Like country music is a very black genre, it's a very Americana genre, it's a very poor genre, and you have to be able to like separate what it is versus what it has been gentrified into, basically. And my Pickens playlist, I think, would be a good start to all kinds of different country music. What I would typically do is if you're looking at country music on Spotify or Apple Music or wherever it is you stream your music, look more at look for country folk music. I find that tends to be a little bit better. But the Pickens playlist I have does have some good country music on it. It just also has some post 9/11 music on it. I'm specifically thinking of a song that exists on it called God's Country by Blake Shelton, which is just as self-indulgent as you think it is, but it bangs. And so it's on the playlist because it's on the playlist. But I would recommend the playlist for basically everything else that's on there. But if you get a particularly song, just move along. I've just got a couple ones on there that I just can't help but nod my little head to, When you were itty bitty, what did you want to be when you grow up? I wanted to be a veterinarian when I was very, very young. But I can't now as an adult, I can't possibly handle animals being in pain. I watched Mickey 17 recently, and they have these little creatures in the movie, and they're not even real, but at one point one of the creatures is injured, and it basically led me into tears. And I was high watching it, but that didn't change the fact that I was emotional over it. I can't handle to see, I have 2 cats, and when I have to take them to the vet because something's wrong, I'm basically in tears. I could not be a veterinarian today. I wanted to be a veterinarian. I wanted to be a teacher, but because my mom was a teacher and my aunt was a teacher and my grandma was everyone, all the women in my life were teachers at one point. It was pretty well beat out of me to not want to be a teacher. People were like, no, you don't want to be a teacher. This shit does not pay. It's not good. Don't be a teacher. But there are still times where I'm like, but I could be, I could be a good English teacher. I think I'd be fun. I think I'd be fresh. I think I'd be very Drew Barrymore and Donnie Darko. But that dream's pretty much been crushed. So I wanted to be a vet and I wanted to be a teacher. And that's kind of like all I ever wanted to be. And now as an adult, I still don't know what I want to be. So ask me in like a year. If you were a dragon, great start. If you were a dragon, what color would you be? What type of breath weapon would you have? And would you hoard relentlessly? Great question. Okay, if I was a dragon, I think I would be a red dragon. I can really feel that in my bones. I would really be similar to the dragon in Shrek. Like kind of red with maybe like some yellow scales, like red and yellow and maybe even like deep purple, very warm toned dragon. My breath power, would I spit fire? Yeah, I probably would spit fire. Don't all dragons spit fire? What powers do some dragons have? Do they have other breath powers? If I was a dragon, I would be like that little funky chunky one who gets disoriented when there are loud noises in How to Train Your Dragon, but I would be a kind of reddish colored one. And would I hoard relentlessly? No. I don't like hoarding things. I was actually just thinking the other day about like people who hoard money. Specifically, I was thinking about Elon Musk and I was like, man, I fucking hate that guy. And I was just thinking like, what would it be like to have that much money? What would it be like to be able to like just so haphazardly spend money? And I can't even imagine it. If I have $5 extra in my pocket, I'm like giving it to a homeless person. I'll pay if my friend texts me and is like, hey, do you want to pay for my nails? I'll do it. I don't care. The second I have money in my account, it's being spent on something or someone. I cannot keep money. So no, I don't think I would hoard relentlessly. I just can't imagine I even think about like celebrities, like bigger celebrities even, like, and I'm like, if I was an actress and I had money, would I keep it? Probably not. And I don't know if that makes me like a bad spender or just a really, really generous person. What is, that hoe over there asks, what is the meaning of life? Oof, good question. I think the meaning of life is to be happy and to make the people around you happy and to enjoy good food and good friends and good entertainment and art and to pursue happiness and to pursue the happiness of everyone. I think you can't just be selfish and want to be happy within yourself. I think the purpose of life is to also bring happiness to the rest of the world. So, was that deep enough for you? All right, those are all my questions. Are they all my questions? Yeah. Oh, there's a Coke or Pepsi question, and Coke, I guess. I don't really drink Pepsi. What do I drink? Coffee and Celsius now, because this shit has me wired. It has me intense. This shit has me more hype than like coffee ever has. But yeah, so that's what I got. I hope you liked this. If you didn't, that's okay. I've filmed a few. I tried to do this a few times. Like I've tried to film this a couple of times. Also, did you like the candle? The candle was to indicate that we were on a date, perhaps a dinner date of some kind. And I was going to specifically have like a table and maybe like a bowl of bread, but then I was just like too lazy to do the bread thing. And I realized that if the camera was any lower, you could see the like boy shorts I'm wearing and also just like the floor. And I was like, does this look bad? But maybe now the candle was distracting. I apologize. Let me know what you want to see. You tell me. I don't even have to do this vibe thing. I'm going to. But if there's something that I'd be happy to make videos about other things. I'd be happy to talk about other things. You let me know, girl. And also, everyone's girl to me. So if you're a man and you're like, oh, girl, yeah, that's you now. So you let me know. I'll do whatever. I'm flexible. Not literally, but figuratively for sure. Please don't be mean to me if you didn't like this. This is a first try. We're starting at very humble beginnings. We're starting from the bottom. We're working our way up. Eventually, maybe I'll reign supreme up in this bitch and we'll have a cool ass, at the very least a chair, because sitting on the floor is kind of starting to hurt my ass. But it'll get better. But you gotta make something first and get it out there, and then it can look pretty later. But in the meantime, this is what we got. This cute little candle. I got this little candle holder from World Market, and the candle is from Pottery Barn, I think. I think they had them on sale. But anyways, see you guys later!